what I wanted to do for Team Talent. I was either going to do a Bible teaching or I was going to sing, but I can't sing, so I have this. This is how we can walk on water. Us as humans, we tend to put our trust in two huge areas of our lives. Number one is our resources, which is our money, our food, our water, stuff like that. And our protection, which is our houses, maybe our weaponry. We end up putting our trust in humanly things, like our houses, our guns, our money. But I think that we need to put our trust into a greater cause, which is Jesus Christ.
Amen.
So I'm going to be talking about Jesus when he walks on water. He basically just starts walking on the water, strutting on the water towards the disciples, which are in a boat. It's storming out. The disciples see him and they're like, "Holy cow, it's a ghost!" And then Jesus is like, "No, I've done all these miracles before. I'm pretty sure I can walk on water." So he starts walking towards them. Peter says, "If it's really you, Lord, tell me to walk on the water with you." And so he calls Peter. Peter starts walking, and then he loses focus on him, and he starts drowning or sinking. But Matthew 14:22 through 33, this is what he actually says. It says, "Immediately after this, Jesus insisted that his disciples get back into the boat and cross to the other side of the lake, while he sent the people home. After sending them home, he went up into the hills by himself to pray. Night fell while he was there alone. Meanwhile, the disciples were in trouble far from land, for a strong wind had risen, and they were fighting heavy waves. About 3 o'clock in the morning, Jesus came towards them walking on the water. When the disciples saw him walking on the water, they were terrified. In their fear, they cried out, 'It's a ghost!' But Jesus spoke to them at once. 'Don't be afraid,' he said. 'Take courage, I am here.' Then Peter called to him, 'Lord, if it is really you, tell me to come to you walking on the water.' 'Yes, come,' Jesus said. So Peter went over the side of the boat and walked on the water towards Jesus. But when he saw the strong wind and the waves, he was terrified and began to sink. 'Save me, Lord,' he shouted. Jesus immediately reached out and grabbed him. 'You have so little faith,' Jesus said. 'Why do you doubt me?' When they climbed back into the boat, the wind stopped, and the disciples worshipped him. 'You really are the Son of God,' they exclaimed. Okay, so my first point for trusting God is we need to adjust our vision. We tend to focus in the things in our lives that seem bigger and stronger than Jesus actually is, like anxieties in our life and stress, stuff like that. We tend to focus on those things. But when Peter started walking on the water, at first he was focused on Jesus, and then he lost focus. He started focusing on the wind and the waves, and what happened? He started to sink. And we do that sometimes. We focus on anxieties and stress, and we end up doubting Jesus because we think those things are bigger than him. We think those things are stronger. And that's not the case. He's ultimately bigger than the winds and the waves and the storms in our lives. He's bigger than the trials and tribulations, just like he was bigger than the waves and winds for Peter. We get scared because we don't know what's going to happen sometimes, but God does, because God sees the big picture. When God calls you to do something, he knows it's going to happen if you stay on track and you follow what he's called you to do. He knows there's going to be winds and trials and tribulations in your life, but he knows you'll be able to face them with him because he's ultimately bigger than that. Just like he knew there's going to be winds and storms for Peter, he knows there's going to be trials and tribulations for us. He'll never give you any trials that you can't face by yourself, because with God we can face the trials, tribulations, anxieties, but also trusting in God isn't very easy. When Jesus called Peter to walk on the water, there were storms, there was wind, there was rain. The water wasn't frozen, so he couldn't just walk on it by himself. He had to put his trust in God, and he had to try to walk past those trials and tribulations. If there were no storms and no wind and the water was frozen, there'd be no trust. That's why I think our walk with God is difficult, and it's not the easiest thing. We're not walking on frozen water. But it's not easy to trust God, so, I'm sorry. We lose focus on Jesus sometimes. And when we lose focus on Jesus, we have to cry out for him to help us. And what does he do when we cry out? He picks us back up. He's not going to be, "Oh no, you thought those trials and tribulations were bigger than me. I'm not going to help you." No, he's always there to pick us back up. And we can make it past those trials and tribulations. We should be able to walk past those trials and tribulations and not have to sink and then have God pick us back up and then lose focus on him again and then sink again and then vice versa, or keep doing the same thing over and over again. We should be able to walk through those trials and tribulations in our life and walk past those trials and the wind and the waves. Also, one of the main things on how we trust God is we have to step out of our comfort zone. Because we have to step out by faith, and we have to know that we don't know what's going to happen. We can't see the big picture like God can. He can give us an outline, but we have to step out of our comfort zone and actually try. If we want to amount to a cute little bunny, and this is a puzzle, 24 pieces, we have to actually put the pieces together. We can't be a cute little bunny if we don't put those pieces in, and we don't connect the pieces that God has laid out for us. He's given us this picture. We just need to fulfill it. We have to step out of our comfort zone. We shouldn't oar around in our boat, and then when God calls us to do something, we shouldn't be like, no, Lord, I can't do this. I'm sorry, I'm in my boat. We have to be able to step out of our boat, because just like Peter, when he wanted to walk on the water, he had to step out of his boat to walk towards Jesus. He couldn't just like teleport out of his boat. He couldn't stay in his boat. He had to walk out. And I think that's what we have to do. We have to step out of our comfort zone so we can actually trust him. We can't stay in our boat. My experience with trusting in God is God has called me to be a children's pastor. And I have huge stage fright, so it's a very hard thing to do for me. And I thought that doing a sermon or doing a biblical teaching would be kind of a good way to step out of my comfort zone so I can actually start my walk towards Jesus. And I was like, okay, this can't be too hard. It's got to be kind of easy. And then I was like, holy cow, no, this is difficult. and then I was thinking to myself, I really should have gone with singing. But to trust God, in my experience too, we have to adjust our vision so we're not focused on the trials and the tribulations, just like Peter was focused on the winds and the storm. We shouldn't focus on those things. We should walk past those. Walk past the wind and the storm and the rain. We should be able to walk past those. And we need to adjust our vision so we're focused on only Jesus, only Him. That's the number one thing. And we have to step out of our comfort zone. Because how are we supposed to walk to God if we can't even step out of our boat and we don't even have the courage to take a step of faith and be able to do that? So we have to adjust our vision and step out of our comfort zone. And that's really the only way, that's the two main ways we can trust in God.